Back on the Morgan Streetman Show with a fascinating guest. His name is David Gornosky. You can find out more about him when you go to aneighborschoice.com, aneighborschoice.com. And David, I have to tell you, I'm reading, it's 2 years old now, this article that you wrote. It's titled, What I Learned About Christian Love from My Conversation with Black Lives Matter leader Hawk Newsome. And so much of what is in this story, this article that you wrote, is so relevant today. It was very forward thinking. At that point in time, this is what we need to focus on right now.
Yeah, and I have an interview with Angela Yee, who is the co-host of the popular radio show The Breakfast Club. That's going to air today. You can go to aneighborschoice.com. We'll have it up shortly, where I had this exclusive chat with her. She's a supporter of Black Lives Matter and a prominent Democrat, in pop culture, one of the most influential black women in pop culture today in terms of media. And, she's on the left. But by talking to me, she was framed right into the world of the Jesus personhood revolution. I said, how about we have no income tax, no payroll tax, and no victimless crime laws? Let's get rid of this drug war and all this stuff. Let's get rid of all these little victimless crime laws, the gun laws and all these little things, no income tax and no payroll tax for inner cities. Let's start with inner cities. Let's call them Jubilee zones. Let's see how they do. And she was right on board with that. So it shows you that, Rush Limbaugh went on their Breakfast Club, and he tried. But when you really get to the real heart of it and put the Jesus's principles at the forefront, you can break through the left and right divide. It's fascinating.
Now that's the same show that Joe Biden was on with Charlemagne, right? That's the same Breakfast Club.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Because we covered a little bit of that show last week, and some of the things Biden said, which I thought were fairly offensive, but, I'm not African-American, so I'll leave that to others to decide how offended they may have been by that or not offended. And, of course, even if you were offended, maybe it's time to show some mercy and some unconditional love and let it go, right? But, David, I wanted you now, because you're such a forward-thinking guy and you are a Renaissance man, and we've talked so much about anthropology and civics and sort of studying how our society interacts with itself, how we interact with each other. Talk to us some, though, about, and I know you've got to be somewhat careful because you've got obligations of confidentiality on some of this because you regularly consult on these types of projects. But tell us some of the cutting-edge stuff that you're interested in and some of what you've learned about some of this free energy technology.
Well, I figured if Peter Thiel can make a few billion off of mimetic theory, I might be able to do something too. But it starts with being able to understand that once we stop the game of scapegoating, we have a new way of looking at things. So when I look at the world of, let's take energy, right? Imagine if we had, because what do these people say about how to make the poor's life better? They always say, just print money out of thin air. Well, that's not going to work. That will destroy the purchasing power. It'll destroy our savings. You can't create money out of thin air. But what you can do is things in the world of real stuff like energy. Wouldn't it be nice if we could create energy that was too cheap to meter, that we could power our houses with water, ocean water, or maybe we could use it to power our cars and our imagine how cheaper food would be if trucks were moving their food with water, not gasoline or what have you. And imagine all the things that would be done to heal the country's divide over how to solve climate change or pollution if we just had a market innovation that was too cheap to meter using something like ocean water. That's what they call low-energy nuclear reactions, LENR. They used to call it cold fusion. It's a real phenomenon. There are experiments being done around the country and around the world that don't get a lot of media attention. And I think the reason why is because if this thing works, you don't need massive government subsidy to make it work. With wind and solar farms, those are a perfect little windfall for people that like to get their fingers on other people's money, because in order to make them relatively affordable, you have to have massive government theft of people's money to redistribute it to make those energy forms more effective. But with something like low-energy nuclear energy, where you can have ocean water power, or not even ocean water, but even tap water potentially, power all kinds of things in the world, that would solve the concern about climate change. It would solve the concern for being dependent on Middle Eastern countries like Saudi Arabia for our oil. And it would just allow us to breathe a sigh of relief, knowing that we're not destroying our environment, and we're not having to rely on massive government expansion of power in order to solve the problem. And what would that do for the standard of living of everybody? It would be tremendous. And how would that be if you didn't have to have such an expensive, utility bill every month, and you didn't have to worry about, the cost of the gasoline you have to fill up every month? If you could just have a liter of ocean water power your car. These are real things. And this is the way Christians should be thinking. We should be thinking that the Bible begins in a garden and it ends in a city. So let's get to work. We have to build. We have to heal. We have to cultivate the land in a way that uses our God-given talents to create win-win solutions. This is what a win-win solution looks like.
Yeah, instead of universal basic income, what we should shoot for would be universal basic energy. So that everybody gets the energy that they need somehow from the environment at no environmental cost, rather than giving them more monopoly money to play with. Let's give them something because like you made the point, which is a great point, something we really didn't get to talk about, some of the monetary theory and some of your connections with the Mises Institute and the idea of sound money and what happens when you don't have sound money, and how, like you said, the purchasing power of each dollar as they continue to print more and more becomes marginally less and less and less, so that what you're actually doing is you're stealing from people who are holding dollars, who are saving money, because rather than distributing more money into the system and making everybody richer by giving away money, you're actually making the people that are already holding money slightly poorer. So let's, instead of giving universal basic income, let's give people universal basic energy. Now, we're down to about a minute, but can you sort of encapsulate any of the current, and I know, again, you've got certain obligations not to reveal too much of certain technologies, but can you give us a status on the current technology? Are we close?
Well, there's a lot of things that are right under the tip of our nose, but what's going to require is we have to be bold enough to challenge some of the sacred cows of things like the nuclear model of the atom and the standard model of physics, because there's a lot of things that are built up not because they're actually scientifically proven, but rather, here comes that mimetic thing again, we like to mimetically congregate around people in past history, in past science, and say, oh, you guys were right, we are going to never question you. Well, you have to question. And if you understand mimetic theory, and if you understand how Jesus is, you will not be afraid to challenge sacred institutions like scientism. You're not going to be afraid to challenge the standard model, and you're going to look for solutions that are right under our noses. What the problem is, it's not a money issue, it's a courage issue. Mm-hmm. Everybody thinks if you throw enough money at it, that'll solve the problems. No. People are afraid to challenge status quo, and they're afraid to challenge that in the form of medicine and nuclear science, and we have to have people who say, you know what, I'm not going to tear people down, I'm going to go solve problems for my neighbor.
Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.